We just heard Kylesa, Unknown Awareness, and this is the top 20 of the year Requiem Metal podcast.
I'm
Mark.
Jason. This is Mark. That our approach was to pick 20 albums, no particular order. Any one of these could be our album of the year, depending on which day of the week you asked us. Well, I wouldn't say any one of them, but there's probably a handful of 5 or 6 that
Maybe
would probably fall in
10,
there. Yeah, 5, 10, 16, 40,
all of
somewhere. All of them, every day, any day. And so we decided to sort of stretch this over a couple of episodes, which I think we're going to put up simultaneously, correct?
Yeah,
so
it'll be a 2-hour or hell,
3-hour almost.
It'll be a party. So
yeah, and there's a lot of good tunage. Probably will make a halfway decent bizarre mixtape of some sort, or mix CD, whatever you want to.
Yeah,
do with
the playlist or whatever kids do nowadays.
Stream it for your Christmas parties.
You can, but you'll also have the Christmas show coming.
Oh, that's
soon,
true.
So.
That is coming up very soon. And speaking of shows, these shows will be episode 79 and 80, I do believe, which leaves us with with a nice, and then we'll have the 2 Christmas shows, which will get us up to 82.
Mm-hmm.
And then over the Christmas break, I think you and I are going to get together with Chris and maybe do a few podcasts like we did last Christmas.
Yeah.
And that's going to get us probably close to, I would say, right around the 88 mark. And Mark and I were
special things.
Mark and I were talking about this, and so I'm going to throw this out now so we can get some feedback from you. We were trying to explore possibly 12 as in the 12 months of the year. It's just some arbitrary number that we can say. The 12 most important years of metal. And so, like 1986, for instance, jumps out. And so we're looking for feedback from you guys, and that could maybe influence us a little too if you give us some insight. So, shoot us emails, drop some lines on iTunes, or leave us some messages on our Facebook page, Mark and Jason.
Mm-hmm.
So just start thinking about it as we're, approaching these special shows coming down the pike. But anyways, back to the top 20. Kylesa, this was a record that was so influential on me that I turned you onto it, because I think we were both lukewarm on the old Kylesa stuff. We thought they were kind of, it was interesting, Lamb of God band or something. We didn't really take the time to get to know them, and it prompted us to do a Kylesa show. I mean, that's when you know an album's influential, when it can almost immediately make you do a podcast show around it. So,
we got a lot of good feedback on that show too.
Yeah, so. Static Tensions. This is really sort of where a lot of I think Kylesa's kind of interesting elements come together with the 2 drummers and the trade-off between the 2 vocalists, and this. And
it's kind of an overall upbeat, kind of like happy party kind of feel to it. I mean, there's nothing remotely depressing. It's it feels like an Iron Maiden record when I listen to it.
And I think that's because the other thing, besides it being sort of doomy and sludgy, is the psychedelic element, which adds a touch of, like you said, a happiness or warmth, 70s warmth kind of to it, or even late 60s kind of warmth. And this tune here, Unknown Awareness, that we just heard, it was between that and Said and Done, which Said and Done's pretty sweet. Mm-hmm. Mark's probably a little bigger fan of that because of the blast beats that you hear kind of going on in it.
Well, we get that in the Tombs and
that's
stuff
true,
too, which is kind of neat thing. Like a lot of this crossover stuff where you can't tell all their influences right away. It's like there's so much, everything's just all bundled up into the one package.
And this scene in particular is pretty interesting, the Savannah, Georgia scene, because this is also where Baroness hails from, and so two very big records coming out of this, college town.
Mastodon out of?
Well, 2 of the guys are out of. I think they might be more Atlanta. I don't know if they're Savannah or not, but yeah. Anyways, it's a cool record, and definitely one you should pick up. And the tune Unknown Awareness, the reason I kind of gravitate towards this is I listened to the crap out of it this year, and so I figured I needed to honor it in that way. But also, it has this sort of upbeat, triumphant kind of nature to the chorus. It has like an old Catatonia, Great Deceiver kind of weird propulsion to it, to the choral line, almost it's pretty cool. But all right, well, that's warming us up with where we're heading, and the next set, I'll let Mark kind of start talking a little bit about the next band.
Well, these are kind of our
there's
the next theme. 3. We've got some, the comeback, the return of death metal.
This is the return of 3 sort of great 90s era death metal bands, all hailing from the European shores of Sweden and Netherlands.
Netherlands, yeah.
So
we've got Unanimated put out In Light of Darkness. their first record in God almost 10 years, I think.
Oh, longer than that. I think Ancient God
16
Evil
years
was like 95 or 96. So yeah, like 16 years somewhere.
And it's kind of amazing. I mean, they were around a little bit after that. After that happened, but they were just touring. They didn't put out any more records. And I think they had one that was completely canned, another record too. So I don't know how much that made it onto this, but to hear this record next, you throw this on, then you throw something on from any of their first couple records. There's barely even. I mean, you can't believe that it was done this far, in the future without having, like, you see a band like Metallica who couldn't necessarily get back to that original fire.
Yeah.
But to see a band that taps right back into that again is pretty amazing. I couldn't believe how good the record was.
And I think that's a theme of these three songs and these three bands that we're going to be looking at along with that is that, the ability to tap into what had been there and make it not be just sort of
it's not retro
rehash.
Either. Yeah.
But like forward thinking and progressing, but yet maintaining all those very important elements that make you want to put on those old Unanimated records. The Black Death sort of sound, the Naglfar, necrophobic, dissection-y.
Well, I think next to Dissection, I think Unanimated are probably one of the best Black Death bands out there, in my opinion.
In terms of like consistent catalog,
and being like really varied in their approach too, between like these acoustic passages, and just like straight out blasts.
And I don't think anyone in the Swedish sort of Black Death scene does a Motorhead biker Dark Throne riff the way that these guys do, and you'll hear that in this tune. What's the tune we picked?
The Endless Beyond.
Oh, okay. Yep, The Endless Beyond. I listened to this song quite a bit, and the title track, In the Light of Darkness. Those are probably the two I think I listened to the most.
And just the way the album starts out is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it sounds like this is like some lost dissection song or something. It's that kind of epic nature to it.
And if you caught the last two podcasts, well, actually, really more the last one, the band we were focused on, Marduk, their last three records have come out on the same label that put this out, which is Regain Records.
Which Regain's almost like the Wrong Again records of
isn't it Wrong Again Records? Isn't that what War Records turned into, sort of?
Yeah, when Wrong Again and War, then they split off, and then instead of being Wrong Again, it was just War Records, and then they eventually became Regain.
Yeah, and so an awesome label, definitely one of the labels of the year. Although, even though we're not picking much off of this label, I'd say the label that to me like jumped out.
Dark Funeral Necrophobic came out on this.
Yeah.
I mean, Dismember's on this label. I mean, there's some pretty unbelievable stuff coming out on this right now.
It's definitely this one and the one that I was just going to sort of give a shout out for, even though I can't offhand remember if anything made the list, but the Profound Lore seems to be putting out some of the more interesting stuff. I almost had Altars of Plague on here, Krallis, just really interesting sort of stuff. I mean, Profound Lore also put out, of course I'm drawing a blank right at the moment with what they put out.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. They're good label.
Stab me in the face. Yeah, I don't know. But in terms of other bands that won't quite make the list that we should maybe get a shout out to, ISIS put out a pretty strong record.
I really like that new ISIS record a lot. It's like produced fantastically, but I hesitate. They've had a couple turds in the past couple records, at least in my opinion. They were just kind of like
The Absence of Truth was fairly boring.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think of...
And they get enough props as is, so...
This is true. Yeah, and that's ultimately why we sort of scratched them off the list, but,
granted, I bought the $27 limited vinyl, so I still totally dig the band, but still, we'd like to... All the other, top 40, top 10 lists or whatever out there, I mean, a lot of these are going to fall in.
Yep.
But, we wanted to kind of skirt a little bit of the edges, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Deathspell Omega put out something that didn't quite crack it. That EP was fantastic. Obscura, which we did a show on Obscura. I mean, that was a great record. It was painful to omit that. Long Distance Calling was another one that you really
this dug. German instrumental rock / metal band.
Yeah.
They have
quite a cult following, kind of like Porcupine Tree used to have in a way. Like
they're on like
pretty strong fan base.
A really tiny label out of Germany that doesn't have a ton of U.S. distribution, but they do have a track that has Jonas from Catatonia. Yeah. It's almost like a Lost Catatonia track. It's really good.
Demonical was another big one, and then last but not least, and the reason I mention it is because in a way it ties in with this set, is that Seance record, which was a pretty good comeback record for an old Swedish death metal band.
So. That's another 16 years after the fact kind of thing, which is kind of unbelievable. There's all, just to throw a couple more, that Nile that came out this year
was pretty strong.
Was pretty solid. Tribulation, the Swedish band Claus, the dude from Hooded Menace, put out a Swedish death metal kind of sounding thing that I just got a couple days ago. And Funebrarium as well, and Suffocation. I mean, there's tons of them that we could have brought up.
This was a pretty tough year. I think much stronger year of metal than what we saw last year.
Last year it was tough to pull a lot of these out. I think.
Yeah. So
especially a lot of the kind of tentpole bands there weren't necessarily a whole lot of those releases. So
well, and then we're going to go from Unanimated into another kind of less dramatic comeback, because these guys have sort of been around, and that's Hypocrisy with A Taste of Extreme Divinity, which came out in the last couple months. Nuclear Blast, which they've been on Nuclear Blast for forever, since like 92 or 91,
just since Penetralia, I think.
So nothing sort of like surprising here, but for a lot of us, like Mark and myself, we kind of just forgot Hypocrisy was even putting out records and didn't really care. And here you get a Kristen Wallen classic cover, which should draw your attention right away. And you get sort of a classic late 90s, mid 90s Hypocrisy sound, like Final Chapter, Abducted era.
Yeah, it feels like it could have came out in like 1997, 98 or something. It's got a really weird kind of like dated sound to the production, but it's not in a hokey way at all. Everything comes across totally honest with it.
And the tune I pulled off is the opening track, Valley of the Damned, and it's got this sort of a haunted crown sort of thrash riff that then sort of grinds into this sort of classic, odd Hypocrisy melodic In Flames type riff, but it's not Gothenburg. It's melodic in that sort of way, but it's Hypocrisy's like abstract approach to
he lives in his own, or he has his own town. So it's his own thing.
He's the mayor of his own town. So he's definitely an insulated sort of strange dude. But it's good to hear Tat Green doing some stuff, because he's really only the previous Hypocrisy record I was telling Mark, was halfway decent. I just picked this up recently too, called Virus, but I think that was sort of hinting towards a full comeback, which they've achieved on here.
Because his last like 3 or 4 records, they've had good bits, but they haven't been consistently good like this record is.
Really, the last thing that had like even like a chunk of good songs on it was the self-titled, and that was really like the first 4 or 5 songs were good in the second half of
was
that
like
record.
2000?
Yeah, 2000.
Okay.
So Final Chapter was the last like great Hypocrisy record. That was like 97, 98. So
been a while.
And then we're gonna end things here with Asphyx, which was a favorite of both of ours, seeing as we got to see them in Maryland, and
which they hadn't had an album out with Martin Van Drunen since 1992.
Yeah.
Since Last One on Earth. So this is another one of those huge, gaps in time. But after seeing them at the Maryland Death Fest, I was like, oh my God. And then, hearing a new record's going to come out, you're always kind of leery. But then when it completely delivers, like even more than you ever expected.
Sure.
Wow.
And unfortunately, we did an Asphyx show, and we did it before this new record came out. And the name of the record is what? Death the Brutal Way.
Yeah. Death, the Brutal Way.
The Brutal Way, and it's definitely a good record. We'll talk a little bit more maybe about the Asphyx song when we come back here. So enjoy Unanimated, The Endless Beyond, Hypocrisy, Valley of the Damned, and Death the Brutal Way from Asphyx on our Top 20.
The
So we just heard Death the Brutal Way from Asphyx, Hypocrisy, Valley of the Damned, and Unanimated, The Endless Beyond.
Whoa, and that was a classic set. And any final thoughts on that particular Asphyx tune and why you selected that one, I guess, as representative?
I mean, well, the chorus, the vocal chorus, Death by fucking Asphyx. I mean, just anytime a band puts their name in it, for some reason that gets me. But no, it's like this great like anthem of like, you know, old school death metal, like, you know, Triumphant.
Well, that's that primitive Celtic frost, sludgy, gritty, dirty, open notes kind of thing that we talked a lot about.
Incredibly simple songwriting, but man, is it good.
Yeah,
and it actually got really good critical praise, which I'm really happy to see that, because I mean, especially with all this resurgence of this kind of like primitive early death metal stuff, to have one of the, you know, originators come back into it
and kind
really
of show them the right way to do it.
Yeah,
too,
like not be too flashy, not have like over the top, super, you know, flawless production and all that. It's a fantastic.
And sometimes people, it seems like there's this aptness to sort of recognize the new all the time and not to sort of throw, you know, credence towards the past and towards these great bands that are still around kind of kicking it. And, you know, it was a good year for some of those older bands. You know,
it's a really good year for those bands.
Talking about, you know, like Immortal and Catatonia, and even My Dying Bride, which didn't make our top 20, put out a fairly decent record and bringing back the violin for the first time and really making it work for them. And
I feel bad in a way not putting it on the list, but just because this was like the Bride record, because they've been kind of, it's the same with Catatonia. They've been kind of like riding this line where, are they kind of retreading the same stuff over and over again, or what? And they really kind of like, you know, totally blew the doors off of them. It's almost like like Gods of the Sun kind of jump.
Sure, but that's all right. You know, I think this is hopefully if it hints well for the future, then My Damn Bride will make future top 20 lists when they kind of top that sort of sound. So, but we're kind of moving in a different direction with our next little set of top albums of the year.
A little of the new,
yeah, a little new, and some American stuff, and kind of, I think this set's, I guess, guided by the fact that all these bands are sort of linked in a way to,
they're all American.
Well, an undefinable sort of quality to their music in a way. The first band, which was Decibel's top album of the year, and also pretty good record, is Baroness and the Blue Record. And Mark and I actually just saw these guys a few days ago playing live, and it was a pretty good show. It was hypnotic. I mean,
well, they had to do with the other bands that were playing with them as well. But I think Baroness is one of those bands that actually sounds better live than they do on record.
Yeah, they were great, you know. And I mean, it's just unfortunate they had to follow two like almost, you know, hypnotizing psychedelic sort of doom.
We had like U.S. Christmas, who was like a 12-piece band who was really like was great, but after a while it was totally like
it was like Neurosis draining. And Earthless was like just a solo for like, it was like
35
one song
minutes.
for like 35 minutes. Yeah, it was pretty
like
awesome.
Pete Sandoval Jr. on drums, just like totally kicking ass.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. And then of course Baroness had to follow that. It was kind of like the time we saw Pelican, Mono, and Russian Circles, and poor Pelican had to follow all those others. And
like Russian Circles were fantastic. Mono was unbelievable, but
and then like
Pelican was a little forgettable.
Yeah, I don't think it was because they're bad. I just think it was like the unfortunate part of, you know, playing after all that. But the tune I picked was Swollen in Halo, and this to me seemed like the pinnacle of the show in a way. Yeah. You know, I noticed a bunch of people after this kind of song played that went off to the merch table and picked up these records right after, you know, so it had that kind of immediate impact. And the first time I listened to this record, you know, after reading that it got a 10 in Decibel, I was kind of like, oh, I want to get my hands on this. This is probably interesting. The record didn't hit me very strong. It is sort of like, it was kind of subtle and it's got a weird
production to it as well.
Well, and I think that and you know, from what they've said about it, is they looked at this as not like a record where they were trying to write songs like that stood out, but just like kind of just create and craft like sort of a continuous work of art, and they didn't really care how people
work on it as an album.
Yeah. And so this song has always sort of stuck out to me as being like, I guess, a song that has a more of its own identity, and it's Swollen in Halo. And we were remarking, I was saying it sounded like a kind of this weird hypnotic loopy riff, reminded me of Jupiter from Cave-In a little bit, and you pointed out it sounded like Failure.
Yeah, which
is a big influence on Cave-In, so it totally makes sense. So if you like,
it all has like a weird southern rock tinge or something to it as well.
Well, these are, again, like Kylesa, another Savannah, Georgia band, but just a really great record. And this is one, you know, Mark and I both picked this up on vinyl. If you're a vinyl head, this is probably a perfect record to just sort of play and not really think about the tracks and just let it sort of flow, you know. Definitely a flow record. So if you're into that kind of stuff, you'll dig this new Baroness. And then we're going to move on to kind of a personal fave, another band we saw actually at the beginning of the summer.
Another band we did a show on not that long ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually quite a while ago, but
and unfortunately, we in that show we actually asked the question, will Keelhaul ever put out another record, because it's been
it was 5 years.
It had been like 5 years, yeah. Which of course they put out that great 7-inch called "You Waited 5 Years for This," and we're actually pretty good friends with these guys, so as much attention as we can give these guys, because they're cool guys and they're a great band to boot.
Well, they're overly humble as well, which I mean, this record, I mean, even compared to what the hell was the last one called now?
Subject to Change Without Notice. Yeah,
which was a good record, but it didn't have the same kind of like fire as 2 did. And this is bringing the kind of complexity and songwriting of the last record, and then like really amping up just like the adrenaline factor that 2 had on it. Yeah, because 2 was like nonstop, like just beat the hell out of you for 40 minutes or
2
whatever.
We were like all over. I had to review that for Eclipse, and then they came and played at New Moon. You know, we set up the
record shop we used to work at.
We did the interview, which was probably the funniest interview I've ever done, because the answers that Will, the drummer, gave was just ridiculous. And if you like this song, go and check out the show we did. Probably in the episode 20s or something. It was quite a ways back.
That's way back there.
This is Triumphant Return to Obscurity, which is probably one of the coolest album titles of the whole year. And the tune that Mark picked off, and this is another blend record. I clean my house to this record all the time. I couldn't tell one song apart from the other, except
in the initial promo that we had too, we didn't have any song titles.
Oh yeah.
So it was just kind of like one song totally bleeds into the other.
Yeah.
But this song, I mean, the opening riff on it almost sounds like a fucking Champs. Type triumphant, just like total video game song,
over the top, and it's Everything's a Napkin. And what's cool is you kind of get that 2 groove that we were talking about before. They really hit it at the 2:30 mark. It kind of is very proggy and challenging, which is what.
Oh, and there's no vocals on the song either.
Yeah, I would say that imagine if the Stooges recorded King Crimson Red. And that's like that's kind of how like Keelhaul, especially this record, Red was a totally instrumental.
Yeah, they're technical and proggy.
Yeah.
But yet they don't come across like stiff like a lot of prog bands do, you know?
Yeah. Well, I remember like Gil, who didn't like that sort of overly prog stuff. He loved King Crimson Red. Gil is a friend of ours who played in a jazz band, Northwoods Improvisers, and he was always picky. He loved Black Sabbath and very few rock bands, had to like have a lot of like punch to it. And he really loved that King Crimson record, and that made me kind of pay extra attention. And I feel like I hear a lot of it in here. I mean, I'd love to like ask the guitar players if this was sort of inspirational to them. So
they'll just fart and say no.
Yeah, we were eating barbecue and watching Drew Carey. So great Cleveland band. But anyway, so we got Keelhaul coming up, and then we're going to end with Magrudergrind, Bridge Burner, and we'll talk a little bit more about what these folks are up to. These happy chaps from Washington D.C. So enjoy Baroness, Swollen to Halo, Keelhaul, Everything's a Napkin, and Bridge Burner from Magrudergrind. Not a Saturday Night Live skit.
How would you look it up?
Sift. That was Bridge Burner, Magrudergrind, Everything's a Napkin, Keelhaul, and Baroness, Swollen, and Halo. And we're marching along. We made it through 7 of our top 20 already. And Magrudergrind, this is something I picked up in the last few weeks, and I was just actually playing Mark this today.
Yeah.
It's, you can't have a better production combo than Kurt Ballou and Scott Hall. Ballou from Converge and Hall from Pig Destroyer, of course. And in a way, it is sort of the mixture of those two personalities. I mean, you hear some Converge-isms, you hear some Pig Destroyer-isms, and then you also have just this sort of, the unique, extra blend that these guys sort of throw in themselves in terms of like adding some like Swedish death metal type stuff. Like
it's got like a Dismember tone to it, but it's also got, when you think of like grind, at least the stuff currently, it's usually super technical, or at least a lot more like musicianship compared to like the stuff in the late 80s, early 90s. And this has more of a feel to me of like the early 90s or late 80s, early 90s grind.
I hear a lot of Terrorizer and Disrupt kind of in there.
And like Repulsion, as far as like song structures, how they're really pretty simple songs. There's not a whole lot of like leads or anything flashy about it. It's just a lot of like almost like old Carcass was just a lot of like muted palm chugging. There's just really kind of like solid, interesting stuff.
Yeah, and this song we played you is probably the most epic song on there. It's 3.5 minutes, but a lot of the songs are 1:10, 43 seconds. I mean, again, it has that sort of diversity. I'd say, kind of Prowler in the Yard type Pig Destroyer era.
Well, there's even a rap song on it.
Yeah, that's true. They do some some weird stuff on. I can't remember the track. Heavier Bombing, where it's got some scratching on it, and then some weird samples from some Trailer Park movie that we were talking about that had Stephen Root.
Trailer Park the movie, I think, or Trailer Park Brothers the movie.
Yeah, something weird like that. But anyways, it's a great record. It's self-titled, Magrudergrind. Willowtip Records put this out. Great cover, the old sort of
nice collage,
grind collages of Scum era and Disrupt and some of that, the sort of classic grind type stuff. But they're kind of they're a latecomer, 3-piece, no bass, just drums, guitar, vocals, kind of in the Pig Destroyer model. And like I said, they've definitely discovered some of the Dismember, even some of the Death and Roll type stuff, like later era Entombed, and it's
more so like in the tones of the guitars and stuff than the actual riffs. But.
Sure, and I don't know if Dysphere is another band, more recent sort of cool grind band that does some stuff.
They've been around forever.
Well,
as far as coming to prominence,
finally in the last 10 years or so. So anyways, check out Magrudergrind, and I'm sure I expect to hopefully hear some good things from these guys in the future, kind of like we did with when Pig Destroyer first kind of burst on the scene. It's like, what the hell is this all about? And now we're going to simplify things a little bit.
Let's get back to basics. Yeah. We're slowly going, from Magrudergrind to Sarke, which Sarke is the dude from Cold with a K, K-H-O-L-D. And
not the really sweet new metal Cold with a C.
Oh, God. No, it's him doing guitars, drums, and bass, and we got Nocturnal Culto from Dark Throne doing vocals. Ted Sakellum.
Yeah.
And no, this is like
Vorunah.
It might seem like a bizarre pick for a top. I mean, just because it's kind of like a weird one-off thing.
But if you know Mark and I, you know what like utter
it's incredibly
black metal guys we are.
It's incredibly enjoyable in the fact that there's no pretense to it, and it's super super simple. But it's super like catchy, and I've listened to this thing like 4 or 5 times in a row before.
Oh yeah,
like it's just a great. It's a weird mix between like a little bit of. I mean, we got a little bit of black metal, a little bit of Celtic Frost, a little bit of like just straight up heavy metal stuff going on to it.
It kind of has that eye feel to it in a way. But not as like complex because they don't play the way a Bath plays,
and there's barely any and it's all almost like AC/DC style drumming throughout the entire thing, like really interesting, like Celtic Frost-ish uses of keyboards,
especially in the chorus here coming up.
And it's always like the choir, like not harpsichord, but like pipe organ type keyboards.
And I mentioned that it reminded me the old like first couple Gehenna records, the way that Sarkana played.
Really simplified
minimalistic
stuff that's
keyboards.
Just kind of backing up the guitars a little bit. But
and the name of the record's Vorunah, which means something. I remember reading what it meant, but it escapes
extra credit if you look it up now.
It escapes me at this point. But the tune we're gonna play is The Drunken Priest.
That's right.
And it's
smell of blood and vomit.
Blood and vomit. That is like the lyric of the year, And if
the lyrics on the whole thing are pretty over the top. There's one later on, like they're singing about a carpet of human hair.
Yeah.
I mean,
Frost Junkie, about
Frost
a guy
Junkie.
who's like addicted to sleeping out in the winter and stuff. I mean, it's really like almost like
it has like the sense of humor of the newer Dark Throne stuff.
Yeah.
But it's really simplified. Really simplified.
Yeah, even simpler than what Dark Throne's been doing.
Yeah.
And so then, we're going to go from simple to complex, and we're going to go into some Mastodon.
From the Drunken Priest to the Czar.
Yeah, to the Czar. So we're getting kind of historical, talking, going from Catholics to, Russian Orthodox with the killing of the Czar and the Tsarina back in World War I when Rasputin and the communists took over and all that good
So you
stuff.
could play this in class for your kids.
I could. I could use this as a historical context piece when we study World War I. And Crack the Skye. This was a record that I think a lot of people didn't like very much when it came out. It wasn't what they wanted Mastodon to be, but to me it seemed natural. This is where I saw Mastodon totally going, is it a little safer, a little more commercial in some ways? Yeah, but we're also about to play an 11-minute song, which isn't very commercial, so. And
I mean, the structures of it, the visuals, as commercial as it sounds, I mean, it's got a really good production, but it's still not anything that's...
Brendan O'Brien's attached to it, who did Pearl Jam, and I mean, he's done... So, like, of course, the diehards are freaking out, but you know what? Mastodon, if any band,
it wasn't a Bob Rock,
Mastodon,
it wasn't a Bob Rock that took the turn. So, no, I think it's interesting because I think people are much more tolerant to new kind of, this more like, you don't even know if you call it extreme metal anymore. It's just
a great metal band.
There's almost a rock
with
band.
Extreme moments,
like elements and stuff to it. So I think people are more accepting of that now than say in the mid '80s as far as like commercial accessibility with internet and all that. I mean, it kind of doesn't matter anymore. But no, I think this was definitely I wasn't really surprised by the jump, but it's also a record that came out quite a while ago. So it's not. I listened to a lot when it came out, and it hasn't been on my radar for a while.
And that's the tough part about doing the top 20. Like I said, there was bands like Krallis and Altars of Plague, which I picked up in the last month and listened to a lot of. But in context, how much did I listen to it in comparison with some of these other records?
Sure.
And unfortunately, I think the one record that sort of got cut right at the end for me was probably Obscura, which is a record I listened to a lot, like in February. Right at the beginning of the year. And it's like you said with Mastodon, this came out probably like April or May, that's a long time ago, and there's been a lot that's come out since. So, but this record I think holds up well, and it's kind of gotten a second nature in a way. I think people are starting to appreciate what it really is. So, all right, so enjoy Sarke and Sarke the Drunken Priest, followed by the Complexity progressive story of the Czar, which is a full 11 minutes long. So, from Mastodon.
Before him, a book of old souls. His eyes are blinded by the darkest shades.
That was the Czar from Mastodon and Drunken Priest from Sarke. And we're going to wrap up part 1 here with our 10th of 20 picks. And Mark, tell us a little bit about this.
Well, we just did a 2-part show about this band. So
you should hopefully know everything there is to know about Marduk.
But yeah, they put out Wormwood this year, which actually they put it out about a month ago or so. It's relatively new release.
Well, I think it was out in Europe for a little while sooner, and it's finally come to America.
Finally got it. Actually, yeah, I think it's been a couple. By the time this comes out, it'll be out at least 3 or 4 months, probably.
True. That's true.
But Whore Crown, which is one of my, I mean, it's one of the more
family, really.
It's one of the more simplistic, not as much of a, I guess, creative approach to the construction of the song as some of the other ones. Mm-hmm. But as far as the simplicity and like getting every emotion into that song that I get out of the thing, it's just this completely visceral, back to basics, like really straightforward black metal song that's. It kind of hits everything. We've got, the blast in it. We've got this really incredibly simplified, just one riff that basically is almost repeating through the entire thing.
Sure.
And a little bit of chanting and stuff in the background. But this is one of those kind of songs I'm on the expressway. I'm weaving in and out of cars like a video game. So this was
to punch people. Didn't you say this made you like want to punch walls and stuff like that?
Oh yeah, I mean it's like it's like a primal urge kind of song. So and this is one we didn't play on the show
purposely.
The Marduk show. We were going to do this. So
and you said what's interesting too about the riff that kind of comes in about halfway through the song that kind of dominates the second half of the song. He has like a triumphant kind of like major chord aspect to it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem at all. It's not like that eerie kind of unsettling, like mayhem sounding like open strumming thing.
We're doing a lot on Wormwood and Rom and stuff like that. This is a different sort of
Plague Angel and Rom.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a really weird approach. I mean, as we've talked about in the Marduk show, I mean, it's recorded like a 70s rock band, but it's playing black metal. So
yeah, it's a good energetic way to sort of send out part 1. So we got Marduk Whore Crown coming up, but obviously this is just part 1, so we're gonna kind of leave you hanging for a few minutes, and maybe you'll need a break after part 1 before you download part 2.
Well, if this is just basically from bandwidth constrictions, otherwise we just do the whole thing.
We would do the whole thing, but let us know what you think so far. Hopefully these choices fit with the aesthetic that is Requiem Metal Podcast. I mean,
well, let's not say goodbye. Let's just say we'll see you.
We'll see you in a few minutes.
We'll see you in 5 minutes and 27 seconds.
Yeah, 5 minutes and 27 seconds. So enjoy Whore Crown from Marduk Wormwood.